At a thriving black charter school in Charlotte, North Carolina, Principal Darien Rhodes is beloved by students, parents, and school board officials. A former foster kid turned education reformer, his rise from nothing is the stuff of local legend. But when a new statewide initiative starts testing student and staff DNI for ancestry-based learning programs, a shocking cross-reference triggers a flag in an unsolved 1996 homicide in rural South Carolina, a case involving the mysterious death of a white teenage girl found near a black church. The DNA match reopens wounds long buried, and as local detectives try to quietly build a case, a former student turned true crime podcaster gets wind of the connection. She remembers Rhodes acting strangely back when she was in 8th grade, and the way he always shut down any mention of that summer. As public support clashes with buried truths, and as Rhodes insists he's being framed by a corrupted system, the story slowly unravels the truth. Was it self-defense or something far darker? Before we expose the secrets buried in this case, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because in this world of lies, betrayal, and missing files, one click might be your only way to the truth. Now, let's begin. The morning bell rang through the courtyard of East Briar Charter School, like the start of a song everyone knew by heart. Kids spilled from buses, laughing, tumbling toward the front doors in bunches of backpacks, hoodies, and rhythm. The school, nestled on the southeast side of Charlotte, stood like a lighthouse for the neighborhood, not just a place to learn, but to be seen, to be believed in. And no one embodied that more than Principal Darien Rhodes. He stood at the gates every morning, a sharp navy blazer buttoned over his solid frame, nodding and greeting students by name. "Hey now, Derek, keep those pants up. I see you," he called with a grin, pointing at a freshman whose waistband had ideas of freedom. "Layla, that poem you wrote had me choked up, girl. Don't think I forgot." "Morning, Principal Rhodes," echoed back at him a dozen ways, like a ritual. But on this particular Monday, under the warm sun of early spring, Principal Rhodes didn't know his name had just pinged in a system he didn't even know existed. Over 100 miles away, in a sterile lab contracted by the state's Department of Education, an algorithm had finished running a sweep. The program had been created to align family ancestry and heritage with educational initiatives, a buzzy new policy tied to cultural identity and student engagement. Most schools joined voluntarily. East Briar was one of the first. It had started innocently. Rhodes himself had greenlit the pilot with pride, encouraging staff and students to participate. "We talk about knowing where we come from, right?" he'd said at a staff meeting. "Well, this is our shot." He'd smiled, wide and open, like always. But now that smile, that DNA had come back with a buried match. The sample flagged wasn't for some long-lost cousin in Ghana or a Civil War veteran. It was linked to case hashtag SCPD-96-422, a 1996 unsolved homicide file in Sumter County, South Carolina. A teenage girl, found face down in a stream behind the abandoned Antioch Chapel. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. Suspect, never found. Leads, hold for nearly 3 decades. Until now. Back in Charlotte, Rhodes walked into his office with his usual rhythm. Mug of coffee in one hand, a stack of handwritten encouragement notes in the other. On the wall hung a photo of him shaking hands with Michelle Obama. Next to it, a framed quote, "If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair." His assistant, Jalen, tapped lightly on the doorframe. "You've got a board meeting at 10, and Dr. Voss from DPS is downstairs. She says she needs 5 minutes before the student wellness briefing." "Dr. Voss?" he asked, arching a brow. "She didn't call first?" "Nope." Looked tense. Rhodes exhaled through his nose, nodding. "All right. Send her in." Downstairs, Dr. Camille Voss was already pacing the corridor near the guidance wing. She was head of the district's partnership with the state's identity matching program. Calm, clinical, usually unreadable, but right now her jaw was clenched and she kept checking her phone. When Rhodes approached, her eyes darted up. "We need to talk privately. Now." She barely waited for his nod before brushing past him into an empty side room. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and pencil shavings. "Camille?" he said carefully. "What's going on?" She pulled out her iPad and swiped with the stiffness of someone who wished her hands weren't shaking. A staff sample triggered something. One of the state's systems, a cross-match. And because we were a test site, it auto-reported. His stomach dipped slightly. Who? She turned the screen to face him. The name in bold wasn't just familiar. It was his. Rhodes stared at the screen, expression frozen. "That's got to be a mistake." "It's not. It matched your staff ID, DNA from your participation form." "Darien, this isn't ancestry trivia. It connected to a criminal file." He blinked slowly. "What file?" Dr. Voss hesitated, then exhaled. "A homicide. 1996, South Carolina. I don't have access to the full report, just the flag. They've locked the file now, which means someone in law enforcement's been alerted." Silence wrapped around them like thick wool. Then Rhodes spoke, voice low, even. "Camille, you know me. I've built this school from the ground up. Why would my name be in anything like that?" She didn't answer. But she didn't look away either. That night, somewhere in West Charlotte, a woman named Imani Clark sat in her apartment with a half-lit candle flickering beside her laptop. A former student of East Briar, now a podcaster with a growing following under the name Black Lens Investigations. She was finalizing her next season, Southern Whispers. When she typed Principal Rhodes' name into her new database, a project compiling overlooked deaths of black youth and unresolved cases in Carolina counties, something pinged. She frowned. The Rhodes family wasn't from Charlotte originally. They were from somewhere deeper south. Her eyes narrowed. She clicked the archive link again. SCPD 96422. Victim: Abigail Renner, age 17. Witness noted: young black male, aged approximately 15 to 17, seen fleeing area of crime. Her heart skipped. Imani sat back. She remembered something. Something Principal Rhodes had once said to her in 8th grade. Just the two of them. A comment that struck her as odd back then, but she'd let it go. Now she couldn't, as she had a mic and a mission. The wind carried the sharp smell of fresh-cut grass across the campus as Principal Darien Rhodes stood alone in the darkened gymnasium. The basketball court, usually buzzing with kids' laughter and squeaking sneakers, now echoed only his thoughts. The lights were off, except for a single beam from the hallway door he hadn't bothered to close behind him. He leaned against the bleachers, jaw tight, staring at nothing. His blazer lay folded beside him. Sweat lined the collar of his dress shirt. He hadn't told anyone. Not yet. Camille had said the report hadn't gone public. But the way she looked at him, like he was some kind of puzzle she'd never quite figured out, that was worse than yelling. Worse than fear. Rhodes rubbed his hands together slowly, like he was warming them at an invisible fire. And in his mind, he was back there again. South Carolina, 1996. The creek. The heat. The sound of frogs in the dark. And her, Abigail. Meanwhile, just 3 neighborhoods away, Imani Clark sat in her studio, headphones over her ears, as the mic in front of her recorded her low, even voice. Some crimes go cold, some are frozen by design. She paused, eyeing the waveform on her screen. Tonight, we revisit a file you've never heard of. Case SCPD 96422, The Girl by the Creek. A story swept under the moss-draped rugs of the rural South. But what if I told you the story's not over? A beat of silence. Because someone in Charlotte, someone powerful, may hold the missing piece. She hit pause. The silence rang loud in the room. She knew she was playing with fire. But the more she pulled at the threads, birth records, police archives, old yearbooks, the more she couldn't ignore what was sitting in front of her. The girl, Abigail Renner, had been found a few miles from where a 16-year-old Darien Rhodes had been registered as a foster youth at the time. He'd gone by his mother's last name back then, Darien Porter. She'd found it in a long-abandoned court transcript from a minor offense, breaking and entering. The judge had sealed the file after the youth home intervened. But the fingerprint, the digital echo, had remained in state juvenile records. She traced that print to the recent Vienna sweep at East Briar. Now it all pointed to one man. Back at the station, Detective Asa Bradley was thumbing through a folder he hadn't touched in 12 years. He wasn't the original lead on the Renner case. That was old Detective Lambert, now dead from a stroke. But Asa had been the rookie who bagged the evidence back in '96. He remembered the girl's wristwatch, the way it was still ticking, even as her body had gone cold. And he remembered the missing piece that bugged them for years, the partial print on the stone beside her skull. No match back then, no one in the system. They ran it every 5 years out of procedure. But now the new AI matching system had flagged a connection, not a new name, an old one, Darien Porter. A.K. Darien Rhodes. Brantley swore under his breath. He looked up at the board where the cold cases were pinned like forgotten ghosts. He scribbled a note in black ink. Matched sample, reopen. He didn't press the button yet, not officially. But something told him this wasn't just a bureaucratic glitch. Something told him Rhodes had been running a long time, and that his past had just caught up. The next day, East Briar felt off. Subtle things. A parent lingered too long in the front office after signing her son in. A group of juniors whispered near the lockers, eyes darting toward Rhodes' office. Jalen, his assistant, kept glancing at him with a kind of nervous politeness that hadn't been there before. "Everything all right?" Rhodes asked casually, sipping from his travel mug. "Oh, yes," Jalen said quickly. Too quickly. "It's just Dr. Voss hasn't returned my calls." He nodded, though his jaw clenched again. Probably just caught up in district stuff. She hesitated. "You okay, Principal Rhodes?" That question landed with weight. He smiled, but his eyes didn't follow. "I'm good, Jalen, really. You know me." Later that night, in his apartment above the coffee shop near Mint Street, Rhodes opened the drawer he hadn't opened in years. Inside was a stack of old letters from his first teaching job, faded Polaroids, and at the bottom, an envelope sealed in tape. No label, just the crinkled bulge of contents inside. He peeled it open slowly. Inside, a photograph, water damaged, torn at the edge. It showed a wooded trail. A girl with light hair smiling at the edge of the creek. Bare feet, summer dress. Behind her, blurry in the background, a young black teen half-turned, face in shadow. Him. His hand trembled. His throat dried out. He sat back in the chair and pressed the photo to his knee. He hadn't meant for that summer to happen like it did. But no matter how far he'd come, no matter how many kids he helped, how many speeches he gave, how many plaques they nailed on the walls in his name, the truth was still there, right by the creek, still waiting. The public library smelled like dust and quiet. Imani Clark sat cross-legged at a microfilm viewer, scrolling through archived high school yearbooks, her thumb twitching on the dial. It was nearly midnight, but she'd bribed the custodian, an old auntie from church, for one more hour of access. She wasn't chasing headlines. She wasn't after internet clout. This was personal. Back when she was 13, Principal Rhodes had pulled her out of a fight behind the gym and walked her home. No write-up. No lecture. Just a strange conversation that had always stuck with her. You ever feel like some mistakes follow you, no matter how far you run? He'd asked. She hadn't understood it then. Now she was starting to. Click, click, stop. The screen lit up on a grainy yearbook page from 1996, Sumter High School, South Carolina, the junior class. She scanned the faces one by one until her finger landed on him. Not Darien Rhodes, Darien Porter. Same intense eyes, same half-smile. Same boy who would become the man who ran East Briar like a kingdom of second chances. But what caught her attention wasn't the photo. It was the caption under it, transferred mid-semester. No record of re-enrollment. That was February 1996. Abigail Renner died in March. Detective Asa Brantley stood at the edge of the woods behind the old Antioch Chapel ruins, arms crossed as mosquitoes buzzed near his ears. The chapel had long since collapsed, nature swallowing what the county ignored. Only the foundation stones remained, choked by weeds and memory. The crime scene marker, case SCPD 96422, had been scrubbed from public view years ago. But Brantley remembered where she'd been found. He crouched near the creek. Even after all these years, he could feel it, the heaviness in the air, like the ground still remembered. He pulled out the file again. Abigail had been found with a fractured skull, defensive wounds, bruises on her arms. A gold cross necklace, snapped, found nearby. And now a confirmed DNA trace tied to Darien Rhodes, the principal everyone swore was untouchable. Brantley muttered to himself, "If you're innocent, why the hell did you run?" At East Briar, Rhodes stood in the empty auditorium that night, watching the flickering video screen replay last year's student talent show. Spoken word, drumline, gospel choir. The heartbeat of kids who believed in him. But all he could see was her face, not Abigail's, Imani, Clark's, the way she'd stared at him from across the gym during her last year as a student. Observing him, questioning, like she saw something the others didn't. She had always been sharp. She had always asked the questions the grown folks skipped. And now, he felt it. She was coming. Imani's apartment was cluttered with Post-it notes, coffee mugs, and 2 open laptops. On one screen was the old arrest record of Darien Porter for trespassing at an abandoned farmhouse the summer of '95. On the other, a paused interview file from a decades-old local news clip. She hit play. A white-haired woman appeared on screen. Abigail's mother, speaking at a 1997 vigil. "If someone out there knows what happened to my daughter, please speak. I don't care how long it's been." The silence is a second death. Imani's fingers hovered over her keyboard. She had enough to start her season now. But this wasn't about exposure anymore. This was about the girl no one remembered and the man everyone celebrated. She opened her recorder. "This is Imani Clark, and this is Black Lens Investigations, Season 4, The Principal and the Creek." Meanwhile, back in his office, Rhodes sat across from an empty chair, hands clasped, facing the framed portrait of the first East Briar graduating class. He hadn't heard from Dr. Voss again. He hadn't been contacted by police yet. But the silence wasn't mercy. It was preparation. He reached into the locked drawer of his desk and pulled out a worn manila folder, old papers, court transcripts, a yellowed letter from the Sumter County Juvenile Detention Center, a faded signature at the bottom. Case dismissed. Insufficient evidence. Youth released to alternate care. He stared at it for a long time. Then, with a heavy breath, he whispered, almost to himself, "I didn't kill her, but I was there." A storm rolled in that morning. Rain streaked down the windows of East Briar, like the sky was trying to wash something away. In the front office, whispers floated like steam above coffee mugs. Word had spread, not from the district, not from the police, but from Imani Clark's podcast. Season 4, Episode 1. The principal and the creek had dropped at 6 a.m. By 8 o'clock, it had gone viral. By 8:45, students were listening on earbuds tucked beneath hoodies. Teachers were texting one another between bells. The title alone may crack the foundation, but it was Imani's voice that shattered the rest. There's a man you trust. You've trusted him for years. But what if the very person who guided you through right and wrong has hidden a secret darker than any detention slip? No one had said Rhodes' name directly. They didn't need to. Detective Asa Brantley parked across the street and sat with the engine idling. He didn't get out right away. He watched the rain bead across the windshield and roll down like sweat off a guilty man's brow. The official request had been filed. The arrest wouldn't be for murder. Not yet. The D didn't have enough for that. Not without a witness. Not without a confession. But obstruction? False identity? That they could move on. He adjusted the collar of his raincoat, reached for the umbrella, and stepped into the storm. Inside East Briar, Principal Rhodes stood at the podium in the gymnasium. The room was empty except for chairs. Rows and rows of metal seats facing forward, as if awaiting a truth they'd long been denied. He cleared his throat, pressed record on his phone, and spoke. This isn't a statement to the board, or to the public, or to the court. This is for the kids. The ones who came through these doors thinking I was more than I ever claimed to be. My name is Darien Rhodes. I was born Darien Porter. In the summer of 1996, I was 16, angry, and living in my 5th foster home in Sumter County. I met Abigail Renner one night at a creek behind Antioch Chapel. She was kind, too kind to someone like me. She was curious about the world, about people. We weren't supposed to talk. She came from a different place, a different life, but we did. One night, I was running from something, I won't say what. She saw me. She tried to stop me. I grabbed her wrist too hard. She slipped on the rocks, hit her head. I didn't push her, but I ran. I didn't call for help. I watched the water carry her away for a moment. Then I ran. I was questioned. I lied. The system lost the file. They always lose files when the kid's name isn't worth keeping. I thought I could leave it buried. That if I built something beautiful, this school, these futures, maybe it would balance the scales. But nothing good grows out of silence. Imani Clark made sure of that, and I thank her. He paused. Outside, a siren echoed in the distance. Rhodes wiped his eyes. Not for show. There was no one to perform for now. He looked at the last row of chairs. I'm sorry, Abigail. He ended the recording, left the phone on the podium, and walked out to meet the rain. Jalen watched from the window as Detective Brantley approached. She didn't stop him. She didn't cry. She just nodded once, quietly, and let the door close behind him. The arrest was calm. No cuffs in front of students. No spectacle. Rhodes didn't resist. As they walked him out through the front gate, a group of kids stood across the courtyard, watching, some with confusion, some with tears. And one, a senior named Mullick, whispered, "He still changed my life." No one disagreed. Weeks later, Imani Clark stood at the edge of the same creek. It was quieter now. Still, the moss on the stones had thickened, but the water still moved. She recorded her final episode in a single take. He ran from the truth, but he ran toward the light. This story wasn't about a villain or a hero. It was about a boy who never got to grieve, a girl who never got to grow up, and a city that finally stopped pretending silence is safety. She looked out over the current. Justice isn't always a verdict. Sometimes it's just the truth finally speaking. She clicked off the mic and let the silence say the rest. The end. This story wasn't just about one case. It was about how quickly truth can vanish when assumptions replace evidence, and how unchecked authority becomes a weapon instead of a shield. It was about fear, how it twists judgment, silences witnesses, and turns policy into harm. But more than anything, it was about dignity and the fight to hold on to it. For every family who never got the apology, for every name that was buried under suspicion instead of cleared by justice, for every child forced to grow up the moment someone else decided they looked guilty. So if this story made you feel something, don't let it end with sympathy. Let it push you to ask harder questions, to challenge what's hidden, and to care before the sirens start. You don't need a badge to speak the truth. You just need to know when silence becomes complicated. If this story spoke to you, like, share, and comment, because conversations lead to awareness. And awareness? That's where justice begins.